Hi, welcome to My Comic Crush. I'm Vicky Sebring, and I love comics. So let's dive into a long box and see what we find. With me this week is my co-host Scott Sebring.
Hello there.
And today we're going to talk about Batgirl Year 1, which is a really awesome 9-issue limited series that was published February through October of 2003 and was later put together in a trade paperback form and published. Really awesome story.
I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Big fan, yeah. This is basically kind of the retelling of the Batgirl origin story, since it's changed a bit since...
And more specifically, since there's been so many Batgirls now over the past 20-odd years, we're specifically talking about the Barbara Gordon Batgirl.
Yes, Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. Her
Except no substitutes.
Her initial origin story. She's changed quite a bit since her very first appearance back in the 60s.
Well, this is all post-crisis.
Yes.
Or one of the crisis, or how many different crises. It's a post-crisis.
It's a post-reboot. One of the many reboots, because we're all reboot crazy. It's a really awesome storyline. I enjoy this book tremendously. The writers were Scott Beatty and Chuck Dixon, and it's got some really, really nice artwork by Marcos Martin, with inks by Alvaro Lopez and colors by Javier Rodriguez. Finish it out with Heroic Age Separations, letters by Willie Schubert, assistant editor Nachi Castro, and editor Matt Idelson. And all in all, just a fabulous read.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go and retell the Barbara Gordon story, this wasn't a bad way of going.
It is so nicely done. You get a lot of insights into her motivation and her frustrations with everyone in her life trying to categorize her and make her be something she wasn't. And this was kind of her response. Accidentally happening as it was, but still really cool.
I mean, although there are similarities in this storyline and her original origin back in the 60s, there's some significant differences in there as well. A bit of her motivations, but the similarity at least being that she attends a masquerade as Batgirl, and accidentally kind of stumbles upon the whole crime-fighting thing from there. Yeah, that's the similarity, and I think it almost ends.
Well,
and that you have Killer Moth, the main villain.
And Killer Moth in this storyline is a gentleman by the name of Cameron Von Clear, not to be confused with the standard Killer Moth at this point in time, Drury Walker.
I didn't know there was more than one Killer Moth.
There is one more, depending on which Earth you're on, which reboot you're in, but at this point in time, it is Cameron Von Clear, and let's be very clear. Yes, I went there, but he is a loser of the highest order. Oh my God.
Other villains are embarrassed to be around him.
Oh, he is such a loser. He's a sap of the highest order. I mean, first of all, he tries to kidnap Bruce Wayne at the masquerade. If you're going to try and kidnap somebody, really, why would you choose to kidnap them at a policeman's charity masquerade ball? Now, granted, most of the cops there were sloshed and of no use, but there's going to be at least somebody there who will be a problem for you. Not the best thought process, but then he's not terribly good at the thought process thing.
Now this really makes me wonder, when did the Venture Brothers begin? Because, by gosh, isn't this Killer Moth like the Monarch?
I don't know when the Venture Brothers actually started, but there are a lot of similarities that I can see between the Monarch and this Killer Moth. Although I have to say, this Killer Moth is even lamer than the Monarch, really.
Well, I mean, because the Monarch wants his henchmen. He's got his giant traveling cocoon, or the hive or whatever, it's just like...
Yeah, but the Monarch stuff is not being repossessed by the IRS.
Okay.
And he doesn't have loan sharks after him under his real personality name because he's into them for 500 large.
Yeah, and he's not trying to create a protection racket for the guys who do protection rackets.
Yeah, and he's not trying to give them a moth light to shine in the sky to call him when they need him. I mean, oh my gosh, this guy
Lame
is
with a capital L.
pathetic. He's just pathetic. Okay? I mean, but that does not discount how awesome Barbara Gordon is kicking his butt and his henchman's butt. Okay? Because she's still outgunned, outmanned, and outarmed, and, she's still kicking butt. Just because he's pathetic mentally does not mean that he doesn't have some firepower.
I mean, maybe we should take this time to kind of at least do the setup of how she ends up over at this masquerade. Not necessarily going to play by play, but I mean, let's paint a little picture of Barbara Gordon prior to the masquerade.
Okay, first of all, she's very young. She's maybe 18, 19 at this point.
Well, I think they allude that she's finishing college early.
Yes, with she's had an extensive academic career already. She's even taken some pre-law. But, she's no slouch mentally. She graduated early. She went to college early. Maybe she's not quite Doogie Howser. A lot of people have no clue what I'm referring to there, but that's because you're young. But anyways, so she's not maybe she didn't graduate college at 13, but she's well ahead of the game at this point. And she's working as a research librarian for the police. And what she really wants is to be a cop, but her dad won't let her. And it's not just that her dad won't let her. She doesn't meet the minimum height requirement.
Which
is a recurring theme in her frustration because, her dad foils her aspirations to be a cop with the Gotham Police Department. So, she checks into like the FBI and stuff. She knows she's not old enough yet, but she inquires with them as to when she is, might she be an acceptable candidate? And, she says she knows she needs to go back to school and get a law degree, yada, yada, yada. And they say, well, yes, you'd be a great asset in research and stuff, especially with your computer skills. And she's all, I want to be a field agent. And they're like, you don't meet the minimum height requirement. She gets this a lot.
Well, the funny thing is that is one of the significant differences in the reboot of this Barbara Gordon is that it's somewhere in a DC Wikipedia of sorts. Barbara Gordon, classically from the 60s and on into the 70s, was supposed to be about 5'11".
Yeah, that changed.
And in her early to mid-20s, and that's not where we are with this one. She's like more of almost gymnast size.
Yes, she is petite. That does not mean she is not formidable. Because of her petite stature and the fact that she is a girl and, she enjoys being a girl, people have a certain expectation. They see her a certain way, and they are trying to force her into the certain box of their expectations. And this is not something she enjoys, and it does not endear them to her when they try and make her helpless, try and make her less than she is. She is not helpless, but she gets it constantly from the cops that her dad works with, from her own sensei who's training her. He has a certain expectation because she's small, she's very feminine.
Well, when she doesn't come across as being like a formidable opponent or a, not an intimidating, posture or stature, when she's a, short little cute redhead, suddenly everybody would rather, pat her on the head or something as opposed to...
They're very condescending, but she determines, one, to use their expectations against them. Like, there's a scene with her sensei, who is
about a head and a half taller than her.
A head and a half taller than her, getting all up in her face and just ridiculing her in front of the class. And she plays into that. She plays into his expectation that she's a weak little girl who can't take him down. And she plays him like a fiddle until he drops his guard, turns his back, and she takes him down in front of the whole class. You know, she uses the principles that he's supposed to be teaching her about using an opponent's strengths and weaknesses against them. And she plays it out beautifully. Beautifully.
I mean, she mainly says, go ahead, underestimate me.
Makes my job easier. But as she also learns, she has to be careful because their overconfidence can also lead to her overconfidence. And, you know, it's a dangerous double-edged sword. It can play against you. You have to watch out for that in yourself, especially when you're living on the edge, as she winds up doing. She has been foiled in her efforts to be something more than a quiet little librarian stuck in a computer cubicle doing research all day. She wants to be more. She wants to contribute. And all she gets is, you know, hand to the face, slam doors, total disregard, and laughed at.
You know, one of the other differences between like I said, the classic 60s Silver Age Batgirl and this one as well, is that in the classic age, before she becomes Batgirl, Batman's her idol. She really looks up to him. That's her vigilante, like, go-to guy. That's why she attends the masquerade party originally as a female Batman back in the 60s. This time around, that's not the case. The one that she looks up to is Black Canary.
Oh, totally. Very big fan of Black Canary. As a matter of fact, in her frustration, she actually tries to make contact with Black Canary.
Like a fan letter.
Like a fan letter, a hope that maybe she'll take her on as an apprentice or whatever. It doesn't quite turn out that way or go the way she hoped, but it is it is an indication of how formidable she can be in her efforts to get the information to her, and you know, also of her dedication and the fact that she's not. Her intention was never to be a carbon copy of the Bat.
No.
You know, in this incarnation, the whole reason she's at that masquerade party, dressed up as a female version of Batman, is basically to thumb her nose and twist her father, and just give him the old you know. It's a needle at her dad who's been blocking her efforts, and she feels really just doesn't see her the way she wants to be seen.
As a matter of fact, he's the one that coaxes her to go to the masquerade.
Yes, he is the one who gave her the ticket, the invitation, and really encouraged her to go because he was worried about her. She was in a bit of a funk because of all that was going on with her at the moment, and he wanted her to just get out of the house.
Be social, see people.
And she decides to take the opportunity to thumb her nose at her dad and okay, I'm gonna throw this in your face. I'm gonna throw the Bat in your face. And apparently in their house, you never say the B word. You don't say the B word, because even though her dad has this weird symbiotic relationship with Batman and Robin, he doesn't approve of costume crime fighters. He'd rather not have to deal with them at all. And he's very vocal about that.
And he's not even commissioner yet. He's still captain.
Yes, he's not commissioner, although he is quite obviously on the fast track to commissioner at this point.
And so this is very early in the Batman mythos as far as the city's concerned, because when she goes to try to rent a Batman costume, when she's like looking for a Batman costume she can, you know, just go to the masquerade with, there are these all kinds of almost like monster Dracula looking kind of outfits. She's like, is this what people think
totally
Batman looks like? Because nobody really still knows yet about the Bat as far as who, you know, what he looked like.
Well, she does, because of her association with her father and the fact that she's nosy. But yeah, no, as far as the public, he is still an urban legend that has not been 100% confirmed. There are still tabloid reports about the mysterious Batman and eyewitness accounts being published in the tabloids. He's still very much in the unconfirmed Loch Ness Monster stage, shall we say. So yeah, it's Batman is still just this nebulous goody / baddie / who knows in the public's mind. And this is her way of throwing it in her dad's face.
Well, I mean, she ends up having to make her own suit, which I still want to also make a little comment that the store that she, or the costume place she wanted to rent the costume from was Infantino Costumes, which is, of course, the Easter egg of Carmine Infantino, who was one of the co-creators of the 60s Batgirl, just saying, because I'm a big Carmine Infantino fan, and it was really cool to see his name.
It's always cool to see the little Easter eggs and name drops that come in. This whole storyline is replete with what could be, well, you almost want to say it's foreshadowing, but since it comes out in 2003, I know it's supposed to be earlier in the history, but it's later in the actual publications of the history. So technically it's meant to be seen as foreshadowing, even though we already know what happened. There's a lot of references to oracles and Cassandra and masks and just all peppered through this. There's all kinds of little touches about what comes later in her evolution as a character.
Yeah, if you're one that's up on where she's been for about the past 15 years in the comics or whatever at that time, yeah, this all looks like a lot of foreshadowing and stuff. But what I really liked about this story was it's a standalone that you could just, you don't have to acknowledge any of that future.
No, you don't.
Where she takes place here.
Yeah, no, you don't have to know anything about her as a character going into this. You'll get all that you need right in there, right from the get-go. It's a nicely, compactly, beautifully done origin story. Really, really enjoy it. Highly recommend it. You can either, like I said, it was originally published in individual issues, 9 issues, and then later in a trade paperback. So it's out there in both. You can find it. Check it out.
There's actually even a trade paperback, because this was kind of, believe it or not, a bit of a sequel to Robin Year One.
Yes.
But they actually make a trade paperback of those two storylines back to back in the same trade paperback as well. But right now, I'm just focusing on the Batgirl.
And just to be 100% clear here, the Robin in this storyline is Dick Grayson. There is no Nightwing. There's been no Jason Todd, no Tim Drake, nobody else. At this point, there has only ever been one Robin, and we're still fairly early in his career with Batman.
I mean, pretty much, they're really kind of showing Robin kind of still very, very early in his at the gig of being Robin, like possibly only being in it for about a year or so, a year ahead of her, but still very early on in that stage.
Yes, this is a very young Dick Grayson. He is probably slightly younger than she is at this point. At least it's never specifically stated, but that's just the kind of impression you get. Not uber younger.
Well, I think he's well just getting into high school, it feels like. I mean, he notices girls.
A lot. He notices her a lot. And that's also one of the things I really do like about this story and the way it's told is you get a lot of her backstory that's happening, and then they weave through it her first appearance as Batgirl, as it were. So it's very deftly handled. The flow of her backstory and personal history with what's going on with her as the character is nicely integrated and woven through. It's just beautifully handled. Very well done. I really appreciate good storytelling, and I do feel that this is definitely good storytelling. But yes, back at the masquerade where she is arrived. She is in her femme Batman getup, intending to needle her father and looking for him in the crowd without a lot of success. Although she does see Bruce Wayne, although I think she refers to him as the billionaire waste of space.
He's playing his role to a T.
And he's done it well. Everybody is well convinced. And he is significant in this story as Bruce Wayne. Because the Killer Moth shows up at the masquerade to kidnap Bruce Wayne. And initially her dad steps in to try and subdue Killer Moth, who has apparently just escaped from Blackgate prison. But he gets knocked out very fast. So fast, he never sees Batgirl make her entrance. He just gets told about it after the fact. So her dad gets knocked out by Killer Moth, and she basically goes in there and tells Mr. Wayne to run and takes on Killer Moth and his goons herself. Why? Because she sees somebody who needs help, and she's not one to stand on the sidelines and just let something bad happen without trying to do something about it. And a lot of the cops are so drunk that they think this is the floor show. So they're basically just sitting back and laughing at it, at least until the bullets start flying. But anyways, you get some really nice action scenes in there with her fighting the Killer Moth and his goons. And you get some really, shall I say, fun insights into what's going on in Killer Moth's head, who is really pissed off to see another bat in town, especially a girl who's kicking his butt. One of the details I love in this fight scene is the fact that, okay, she's dressed up as what she thought was a femme version of the Bat. She's wearing boots with what look to be at least 2.5 to 3 inch heels. Now, granted, they're not stilettos. They're still heels. And you know what? Heels were not designed for running in. Can you do it short term? Yes. But you know what happens if you run in heels for too long? They break. Been there, done that. And that's something that happens to her in this fight. Her heel breaks off on one of her boots, and she has to deal with that. And I love that little touch. I love that bit of reality. I love the fact that part of her evolution of Batgirl is deciding she needs good, sensible footwear. I can't tell you how much that just tickles me to the bone. Because it's a very common thing that happens with high heels. It's real. And it was so awesome. And I am so appreciative of the writers and the artist and everybody for putting that in there. And it makes sense for her mental evolution, because shortly after this, she's going to go back and rework her costume. And that's awesome to see. And an evolution of a character, to see them trying to figure out what works in their costume. Especially because as a cosplayer, I understand that happens to you a lot. You make what you think is a great representation of the character you want to go out there and represent and show your fandom and love for. And when you get out in reality, you find out that you can't sit, you can't breathe, you can't move, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's insane, and then you have to go back and rework. So I like it. Just appealed to me on so many levels. Because that was always one of my beefs with the whole Spider-Man thing. As a kid, it's like, out the door, he just whipped up that costume. Especially as I got into sewing, I can tell you don't just whip up a costume like that.
Oh, in all fairness to Spider-Man, when we go back in the day, not the movies.
No, I understand
not the movies. Albeit though Civil War actually does it a lot better at explaining his costume. But anyway.
They did it nicely.
But in the movies, or I should say the original comic, he goes out to fight a wrestler to earn some money. And, he just kind of throws something kind of together like a sweatshirt and throws, almost like a stocking over his head, and he fights the guy. And realize, oh, well, if you want to be a wrestler, you kind of need to have a little bit of a thing. I could put you in show business or whatever. So he tries to put together a show busy costume. His initial costume, the way it was illustrated back then, I always thought looked a little bit more, okay, it's neat, but didn't have the detail we have these days where we go like, oh, that's a really put together, fitted, and all that.
The evolution. Although, actually, I suppose if you're the type of brain who can engineer and produce web fluid and a web fluid extruder, you probably could make a decent costume. You probably could handle the geometry and the physics and the actual manual construction. I think about it.
I absolutely love a thing. We're going off on a tangent on Spider-Man.
Tangents happen.
But real quick was like in the 70s, I love an issue where he was trying to repair his mask that had been scratched in the back by the jackal. Had these claw marks or whatever in the back of it. And he was trying to, repair it. And of course, he sticks his finger with a needle, going, ow, nothing worse than having to repair your own costume. So Peter got good at it.
Well, and I love bits like that no matter what comic you're in. I love those little real world details when they throw them in and they give you just those little insights into the day-to-day. I always appreciate that.
I mean, even in this Batgirl one, she acknowledges like, wow, Batman must be rich.
Right, because Barbara Gordon's going bankrupt buying this stuff.
Yeah. And she's just trying to make do.
And she's just trying to make do with climbing gear and tasers and beefed up computers.
Good shoes.
Yeah, she's worried about defaulting on her student loans.
Soon to be defaulting on her student loans.
Yeah. So but I love those behind the curtain glimpses. I always have. They flesh out the characters, I feel like, and make them a lot realer, which, when you invest something in these characters, you want them to be real.
Real enough. I don't really want my comic books to be uber real, though I would like them to be believable.
I am more than willing to suspend a lot of disbelief for my comics, my books, my science fiction, my fantasy. Not a problem there. But I do appreciate when you throw in the little realistic details that make that character's life more well-rounded and not so one-sided. Because quite often when you deal with a superhero or a fantastical character, what you get is only the fantastical or exciting side and not the mundanity. And the mundanity is a balance out. It doesn't...
I think it's a nice touch. I think it's a nice detail. And it's something you can relate to, especially like, does Superman ever have to go out for groceries? We don't know.
Does Superman ever get spinach caught in his teeth? Who knows?
Does he need to brush his teeth at all?
Does he use his laser vision in the mirror?
Actually, he does to shave.
Does he have super plaque?
Oh, gosh. Only if it had been engineered by Brainiac.
I have a question. If Superman sticks a Q-tip too far in his ear, what bends, his eardrum or the Q-tip?
The Q-tip. The Q-tip. Always the Q-tip.
Okay, I know we got off course, but, that's all right. It's okay. Back to Barbara Gordon and, her whipping up. And she is totally whipping up on Killer Moth and his goons and their little Armani suits and designer sunglasses. And let's be quite here. Von Clear is a rich wannabe crook who rents all his crap. But
I think he used to be rich.
He used to be rich. He started out rich.
Started out rich, but this gets expensive real quick.
And obviously he's not terribly good at managing his finances. I mean, at one point, even his goons are like, why don't we just go and knock over and do a job to get some funds? And he's like, no, I want the crime lords to pay me for protection. And they're just, and the hirelings, they're just looking at each other like, whatever.
I mean, he's got a plan. He's got a dream. it's kind of a lame plan and it's pretty lame dream, but it's his.
You know, it's like, what makes you think that people who are in protection rackets are going to let you pull a protection racket on them? They know how this works. Really. He's just, he is such a turkey. And he deserves what he gets. He totally does. Now, when he winds up hooking up with Firefly's not a turkey. He's not wet. He is psycho, crazy, dangerous. End. Period. Dot. Killer Moth is just putty in Firefly's hand. So easily manipulated and bent, and I mean, Killer Moth is nothing but a joke until Firefly starts pulling his strings.
So how do you think Batman feels about this new, bat person coming in?
He is not amused.
Notice I said bat person. How did she get the name Batgirl?
Killer Moth gave it to her. She didn't want it. When she heard him describe her as Batgirl, she actually got her hackles up a bit. She's like, I would have preferred to be Batwoman at the very least. But yeah, it's not how she wanted to hear herself described. But once it's out there and people have heard it, then it's out there. She didn't want to be a bat. As she said, she would have much rather been something else than affiliated in that line. However, while Batman is not amused, Robin certainly is. You can tell this from the get-go that he is just totally bemused and probably more than a little besotted with Miss Gordon and her Batgirl incarnation. And they do run across each other very shortly after the... not at the masquerade itself, but in the premises beyond the masquerade, where things have moved from the original venture, shall we say, in the process of her fleeing the scene.
It's not too far after the whole episode. The next day, her dad didn't see her in action, didn't see Barbara attend the masquerade. Barbara's able to kind of, act like she wasn't there at all. And Batman and Robin kind of start to play a bit of this almost like good cop, bad cop premise with her.
They play her a lot.
I mean, Batman's like, I don't want you involved in this at all. How dare you wear the bat? You have no right to be in that suit and that sort of thing. And meanwhile, he's got Robin kind of like, palling up, and
Robin is even supplying her with gear.
Well, when some of the gear is even a full-blown motorcycle.
Among other things, she gets bat lines, batarangs, flash bombs.
I mean, this is kind of all into the idea that Batman is trying to put her kind of like through the test, as it were, down the line without her actively knowing that he is. And he just wants to make sure, if you are going to do this, don't use stuff that's going to kill you.
Yeah, I mean, to a limited degree, he is testing her. But to a larger degree, he's just trying to keep her safe until she gives up and goes home. He doesn't know what her agenda is. He doesn't know why she's doing this. But he wants to make sure that she doesn't kill herself doing this. And she almost does. At one point, she jumps off a building using a standard mountain climber's rope, which has no give. Which means when she hits terminal velocity and she hits extension and pulls back on that rope, it's either going to yank her arms out of her sockets or slice her fingers off, and either way, she's going to die. There are physics involved here that may not be readily apparent to the novice, and as a matter of fact, that's one of the ways that she winds up becoming more involved with Batman and Robin's good cop, bad cop, is they save her from that fate.
Like I said, this overall series is a bit, like I said, of her journey eventually, finding her way of, becoming Batgirl. I mean, because she flat out just starts taking on, guys, robbing little, convenience stores, and wherever she can help, she tries to be there.
Right. She's trying to make a difference, and she is finding her way. she didn't set out necessarily to be a vigilante, a costumed crime fighter. It's something that she sort of fell into by accident and circumstance. However, it agreed with her, and it started to feed something within her, and she starts to own it.
Oh, very much so. I mean, she partners up with Robin here and there, and at one point he's calling all the shots, he's leading the way, and eventually she's like, "Nope, I know where to go. I'm going this way." And he's like, "What?" She's like, pretty much to herself, she's like, "I'm tired of him, calling all the shots and follow him here and follow him there." And she's very much, she's going to try to do as much herself, if not lead.
Well, that's part of been her whole internal struggle through this is people trying to tell her what to do and how to be, and not letting her make her own path and decisions. And she's not going to put up with that. She's coming into her own. She's finding her inner strength and beginning to trust herself and find her way. And at the same time, she's also acknowledging that, she's not the be-all, end-all authority and knowledge base, and she does have a lot to learn from other people. One of the things that this story does, I think, quite eloquently, is really put you inside her thought processes and the way her mind works, the way she is seeing the world at this point in time. Now, granted, she is very young, and she will evolve and become so much more, although she's already plenty. But it's always nice to get that really nice window into a character's, the way their brain works, the way, what makes them tick, what drives them. And this character is beautifully laid out in these 9 issues. Well done.
We've only scratched the surface.
Only scratched the surface intentionally. Go out there, check it out, read it. If you have read it before, go back and reread it. I myself have reread it like 3 times this week, just in preparation for this podcast, and I enjoyed it each and every time, so it's well worth the reread, especially if it's been a while. So I hope you do that, and until next week, I'm Vicky Sebring.
And I'm Scott Sebring.
And this has been My Comic Crush. My Comic Crush is a production of Sebring Arts, executive producers Vicky Sebring and Scott Sebring, sound production and theme music by Scott Sebring, special guest provided by Blackmail and Shameless Baking. For more episodes in this series, you can visit our website at mycomiccrush.com or find us on iTunes, Podcast Republic, or wherever fine podcasts can be found. That's all for now, so go out and read something.